welcome you all back for the second week. So, when we concluded the last class, we started with the introduction of the bioweapons and different categories of bioweapons or bioterrorist agent. So, we categorize them in class A, class B, class C, so on and so forth, depending on the severity and the ability to infect and ability to spread. So, today this is the sixth class, the first class of the second week. We will begin with the historical perspective of biowarfare. Many a times we feel that this is something very new. Humanity has not seen this earlier. The fact of the matter is that biowarfare has been there for much more than what we anticipate. As a matter of fact, the first written evidence, if we look back in the history, goes back to 13th century. Whether there were any such biowarfare instances prior to that, we do not have a written history as much, but yes, there are anecdotal evidences here and there. But today we will start off with one of the biowarfare which humankind waged even without realizing that they are kind of toying with microbial weapons, and this dates back to 1346, the siege of Kaffa. So, before I get into that, I will briefly tell you in a nutshell the story what happened. So, there were two warring factions, and one of the warring faction, in order to kind of pull the other warring faction out of their fort, what they did, they threw dead cadavers inside the fort from outside. So, it's one group was inside a fort, the other one was outside, they were attacking them, they were rather chasing them, and they threw a dead cadaver or multiple dead cadavers. Again, there is not a very clear record how many and how they did it. And their whole idea was very simple. Because these dead cadavers, animal cadavers, are going to get rotten and there will be a lot of smell, and automatically the people who are inside the fort, the other warring faction, they will escape out of because of the foul smell. That was the whole idea. At least that is what historians claim at that time. But that turned out to be a nightmare, and how it turned out to be a nightmare, now we are going to talk about the war at Kaffa. So, you might wonder, where is Kaffa? So, this is a place of the present day Ukraine. All of you are aware about the Ukraine war. So, there is a specific city in Ukraine where at least 700 years back this war took place. So, coming to the slide, if you look at the slide, so today we are going to talk about the history of bioterrorism, that is a Black Death, account by the Genos Gabriel de Mussi. So, this is the gentleman who documented this whole thing in, I believe, Latin, some of the other languages, but not in English. It took a lot of time before this written account of this war was translated in English, and we kind of got an idea about how this Black Death took place. Black Death is essentially a plague epidemic. All of you have heard about plague. Okay. So, now let's look where Kaffa is. So, Kaffa is a city called Feodosia in Ukraine, the current day Ukraine, and the war actually started somewhere out here, and if you look at the spread, if you follow these bold arrows, this is how it spread from out here. It kept on spreading. So, look at the spread of this particular plague infection all over. So, from here it spread all the way the current day Europe. If you look at this, the whole Europe, and it moves on and all the way across the globe. So, this is where you have the Caspian Sea, just above Caspian Sea, somewhere out here. Now, in terms of biological warfare in 1346, the siege of Kaffa, one of the warring faction was the Mongol army, the Tatars, who hurled plague-infected cadavers into the besieged Crimean city of Kaffa, thereby transmitting, even they are not aware of, they were transmitting a plague-infected cadavers out there. So, if you read through it, you will realize thereby transmitting the disease to the inhabitants, and fleeing survivors of the siege spread plague from Kaffa to the Mediterranean basin. The Black Death swept through Europe, the Near East, North Africa, and the mid 14th century was probably the greatest public health disaster in the recorded history, as one of the most dramatic example of emerging and re-emerging of disease. Europe lost an estimated 1/4 to 1/3 of its population, and the mortality in North Africa and Near East was equally comparable. So, it's basically, it spreads along Europe and northern part of Africa. What you look around the countries like Italy, Portugal, Spain, and on the other side, Algeria, Morocco, the North African part. So, you look at the spread and try to remember when we talk about novel bioweapon or novel hypothesis. So, it means when a population is exposed to a totally new pathogen about which the population is not equipped with, most likely that new pathogen is going to invade and conquer over the existing population. That's exactly what happened during COVID. If you realize, because most of the global population was not immune to it. So, it swept across the world all the way from China to United States, because it could cross the vast ocean, as I was mentioning in one of the previous lecture. That is because of there is so much travel which is happening. There is so much movement of human, animals, plants. There are so much import and export which is happening. So, you realize if this was what happened in 1346, today the magnitude of such attack is unfathomable, and that is exactly what we observed during COVID. Even before you realize, our infection must have reached another country, from another country to another country. It has crossed oceans, seas, and reached to so much distant places where you cannot even think of. And the challenge is, if you do not know, if you do not have a knowledge about this infection, you have no way to quarantine it, because quarantine is done on known diseases, not on unknown diseases, and most of the symptoms which comes initially are similar to any other symptoms. Suppose you are having cold, cough, sneezing, but by the time the pathogen fully expresses itself, it's too late. And you must have seen this map and realize 700 years back, it could completely wipe a huge chunk of European and North African and Northeastern African population. So, that means these events are inspiration for us to learn more and more about how infection spreads over geographical space, and over time how it recurs at different geographical space. That means when we talk about this recurrence, that means the germ goes in hiding, goes in hibernation. So, say for example, COVID spread, that does not necessarily mean COVID cannot crop up again, because there may be people who are carrying that particular pathogen in a silent mode. That's what happened in TB. In tuberculosis, people are silent carriers. You won't be able to identify them. But then, given the right set of situation, the pathogen flares up. And that mostly happen, as you all know, people do not die of AIDS, they die of the other microbial attack or tuberculosis and other problems, because your body's immune system is compromised. That's exactly how most of this pathogen works. Now, from 1346, I move on to the gory saga of smallpox, which is another threat. So, if we look at the smallpox story, that is even much more interesting. In this previous case, we talked about when dead cadavers infected with plague were used as to destroy a population. But here, it happened in a much more interesting way, where blankets were gifted which were infected with smallpox, and we will talk about it in the slides. So, smallpox, the Francisco Pizarro and the Incas. Some speculation of the 15th century. So, we previously we were in 13th and now we are 200 years later in 15th century. Spanish Francisco Pizarro first introduced smallpox as a biological weapon by offering Incas. Incas are the Latin American old population and the historical Incan civilization, gifts of cloth possibly laden with smallpox during this conquest of Peru. Whether the introduction of smallpox was intentional or not, Pizarro was aided in this subjugation of the Incas by the epidemic that raged through the native population. Now, just like the war at Kaffa, it was not sure whether those people knew that what they are throwing. Similarly, in the Incan war, again, they were not sure, or they are not aware, or at least history is not there to tell the exact facts. Were they aware that what they are spreading? But these blankets were infected with smallpox. If we go to the next slide, smallpox as bioweapon. So, the first well documented use of smallpox as a biological weapon was by the British troops in the French and Indian Wars, 1763. So, you look at the map, 13th, 15th, and now we are into 17th. So, it is almost within gaps of 200 years or 2 centuries. Captain Equer of the Royal American presented 2 blankets and a handkerchief laced with the smallpox to the Native Americans as gift. 4 years later, the British General Sir Geoffrey Amherst gave more contaminated blankets to the Native American loyal to the French, killing as many as half of the population of the infected tribes. So, when we talk about the tribes, again look back to the novel weapon hypothesis when I was telling you that in our population, if you introduce, so every population in every biogeographic region are kind of at constant war with the microbes, and we kind of established a harmony. Sometime you must have seen doctors telling you that do not take medication for common cold and all, let the body fight and recover. But now suddenly, if you introduce a very new form of microbial infection, then your body is not used to it. That is exactly what happened, because your body is fighting with the known enemies, but then you put a very unknown enemy. That unknown enemy became the novel weapon to destroy your immunity. So, now talking about smallpox became a less effective biological weapon with the advent of vaccine in 1796. This is a very interesting part. The first vaccine in the history of humankind by Edward Jenner, who demonstrated that inoculation of the cowpox protected against smallpox infection. Yet there are accounts from Civil War of the future governor of Kentucky, Dr. Luke Blackburn, who sold smallpox contaminated clothing to Union officers. So, this particular year, 1796, Edward Jenner discovery is a landmark discovery of how we can counter biological weapon, the discovery of vaccine, first time in the history of humankind. So, if we have to say the first measure to safeguard the biosecurity, I will say this particular event of 1796 is among those very, very early efforts how we can counter, how we can safeguard a population, because with the beginning of the vaccine, and you could see the most recent one in human history, the COVID vaccine, it's a long history from 1796. Today we are into 2024. It's just only 2 years have passed when we have slowly coming out from the saga of COVID. If you look at it, so it's almost 200 years, 1800, 1900, so almost 200 to 300 years of history in this long span of time window when humankind has been slowly learning how to counter all these kind of pathogens. So, going by the WHO report, the last documented case of smallpox in USA occurred in 1949. In 1967, the World Health Organization took on the project of eradicating smallpox, accomplished in 1977. So, if you look back, it's 1763 to 1977. A routine vaccination for smallpox in the United States stopped in 1972, while worldwide vaccination ceased in 1980. The two labs currently permitted to house the virus stocks are the Center for Disease Control CDC at Atlanta, Georgia, and Institute of Virus Preparation in Moscow, Russia. So, another approach is to preserve these bioweapons, because you never know when they will resurface, because you cannot keep a stockpile of vaccine all the time, because that cost and their efficacy may be lost. So, the way you can do it is that you have the bioweapon ready in from the microbes and small ampules, store them. If there is a flare up of that disease at another time, you'll pull the vial, develop the antidote for it. But you have to be very careful if those ampules or those safeguarded bioweapons goes in rogue hands, then there are some serious issues. So, that is why you have to, as per the international consortiums, you have to mention who all are having it. So, CDC Atlanta is having it, as well as the Virus Institute in Moscow is having it. And these stockpile of bioweapons are there in other places, mostly documented, but some undocumented. And the challenge is the one which are undocumented. Now, we will talk about, we discretely pick up some of the case studies for your understanding why this subject is of immense significance. Now, we talk about the bioweapon and the World War I, World War II and the post-World War era. So, during the First World War, if you look at it, Germany infected cattle and sheep with the spores of Bacillus anthracis and infected horses and mules destined for Allied powers with Burkholderia mali. The latter caused both animal losses and human deaths. So, First World War, if we are talking about 1914, somewhere around this, 1914, 1917, right. So, very early, so it's 100 years back almost now, a little more than 100 years, Germans used this to wipe out livestock and horse population, because during that time, most of the armies used to have a big horse, so is being used by the artilleries, and we used to maintain a big horse breeding systems. Now, at that time itself, Germans were well equipped to spread these bacillus and other microbes to wipe the population of livestock. So, while we are talking about livestock, I told you that livestock too has suffered the wrath of bioweapons and biowarfare. Now, the next case is in the 1940s and later, the USA and UK and USSR, three powers at that time, researched biological weapons. As a result, the US Biological Weapon Development Program at Camp Detroit, Maryland, and other places, a huge arsenal was produced comprising of aerial bombs, mind it, this is 1940, artillery ammunition, and warheads containing Bacillus anthracis, botulinum toxin, Francisella tularensis, Brucella medullensis, Brucella suis, Coxella bruntei, Staphylococcus enterotoxin B, and Venezuelan encephalitis virus as biological agent. So, these kind of warheads, if you shoot them at any population by aerosol and physical contact, you can spread any disease out there. So, only in the time of President Nixon, one of the former American president, specifically in the 1971 to 73, did the process of disarmament and destruction of biological weapon begin in Fort Detrick, now US Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease, switched to research on defensive nature. But 1971 to 73 followed by another very important movement which happened. That took place in Russia when the former, what you see USSR, you do not see in the map anymore, that split up into multiple countries. So, what happened during that movement, which is termed as perestroika and glasnost, when USSR split up into its multiple countries, their biological biowarfare arsenal was heavily challenged, because say for example, a country consists of say 10 states. So, you will not keep all the biological arsenal or war arsenal in one place, you will spread in different states. Now, say for example, all these 10 states become different countries, 10 different countries. Now, how you are going to coordinate? So, you have to have a complete international consortium, but when a country is splitting, it is all in a chaos and you do not know who is going to seize power at what place and how somebody is going to, if it goes in hands who are not considerate, they can use it for detrimental purpose. So, with the breaking away of USSR into associated countries, their biowarfare program really caused a lot of international concern that where these bioweapons will eventually land up with. And that was a time when it is suspected a lot of things kind of went off the radar at that time. Okay. So, now very interestingly, in Asia there is another country which was far ahead in biowarfare program, and that country is none other than Japan. If you look at the Japan's biowarfare program, it started in 1930. So, despite international ban on use of biological weapons from 1930 until the World War II, which is approximately 1942, research programs were conducted in several countries, the most developed having been conducted by the Japanese under the direction of General Shiro Ishii. In the Japanese program, the secret facility known as Unit 731 and Unit 100 produced anthrax spores, Yersinia pestis, Vibrio cholerae, Neisseria, Shigella, and Burkholderia mallee. The Japanese were the first to master the production of ceramic biological bombs and use aircrafts to spray biological aerosols or drop infected fleas and rodents. The effectiveness of the new weapon was tested on convicts of prisoners of war, and weapon was used on larger scale against the Chinese population, which caused local epidemics. It is estimated that 10,000 prisoners died as a result of these criminal experiments. So, if you look at it globally, all the way from US, USSR, UK, Japan, there was a race of biological weapons during the last century. While we all talk about the nuclear war, but parallelly there was something else which was going on. And interestingly, it is tough to launch a nuclear warhead, but it is far more easy to launch a biological warhead for biological warfare. And in 1930, Japan was way ahead of United States, USSR, the former USSR, UK, and all other countries. But the downfall of Japan after the Second World War put a comma or a full stop in their biowarfare program. But in the meantime, that whole technology which Japan developed spread into USA, USSR, and other countries, and then began a new era of biological race. And the next class will discuss about how the other countries followed up on Japan advancement in biological warfare. Thank you.